5 very scary, true coworker horror stories. I used to think the workplace was the last place you'd expect anything terrifying to happen. You assume that if something goes wrong out in the world, at least work is predictable, safe, routine. But I learned quickly that sometimes the most unsettling people are the ones you see every single day. The ones who sit 3 desks away from you, who microwave their lunch right before yours, who smile politely, but quietly hide who they really are. It's strange how someone can be so close, yet so completely unknown to you. The first time something felt off was with a guy named Daniel. We worked at a logistics company in Colorado. He was quiet, awkward, always kept to himself. But he seemed harmless, at least at first. He had this habit of standing a little too close during conversations, but I chalked it up to social awkwardness. Then one day, I noticed he always seemed to know things he shouldn't. What I packed for lunch, what time I left home, which route I drove to work. He'd casually mention details that I'd never told anyone. At first, I convinced myself it was coincidence or small talk overheard in passing. But then, items from my desk started disappearing. A pen, a sticky notepad, my favorite coffee mug. I shrugged it off until the morning that mug suddenly reappeared. It was spotless, washed so thoroughly the ceramic almost shined. It was placed perfectly in the center of my desk, with a folded note underneath. Don't worry, I took care of it. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out what that meant. HR brushed it off as him trying to be helpful. But there was nothing helpful about what happened next. One night I'd stayed late finishing a report. The office was mostly dark, every sound echoing. When I walked out to the parking lot, he was standing behind my car, motionless, staring straight at me. He smiled and said, "I like when it's just us here." The way he said "us" made my skin crawl. I quit 3 days later. To this day, I still don't know how long he'd been watching me, or how much he knew. The second situation happened at a hospital where I worked part-time. There was a nurse named Elise. Everyone described her as intense, but I didn't think much of it. Sometimes she was overly friendly with patients. Other times she seemed cold and detached, like she was watching everything through a layer of glass. One night during a double shift, I went into the supply room to grab IV tubing. When I opened the door, the lights were off. Elise was sitting on the floor, completely still, whispering to herself. I couldn't make out the words. She didn't even look up when I stepped inside. It was like she was in a trance. I backed out quietly, closing the door without saying anything. An hour later, she came up behind me at the nurse station. I hadn't even heard her walk up. She leaned in close and whispered, "You shouldn't walk around alone. Not everyone here can be trusted." Then she slid a photo across the counter. It was a picture of me, taken from behind, walking to my car the night before. The angle was far away, grainy, like it was taken from behind a dumpster or a corner of the lot. I asked where she got it. She smiled but didn't answer. A month later, she stopped showing up. Her apartment was found empty, food in the fridge, clothes in the closet, laundry still in the dryer. Everything as if she'd planned to return. Her badge and uniform were left neatly folded on the table. No one ever saw her again. Another incident involved a coworker named Rachel at an accounting firm. She was friendly, upbeat, always laughing, always making conversation. But something always felt rehearsed about her, like she was copying the behaviors of people around her to fit in. One morning, I overheard her whispering angrily on the phone. She kept saying, "You promised you wouldn't show anyone." Her voice was shaking, and when she hung up, she immediately smiled like nothing had happened. Later that afternoon, I checked my email and found a message from an unknown address with the subject line, "Do you know who sits next to you?" Attached was a video, security footage from inside the office. It showed Rachel sitting alone at her desk at nearly midnight. But she wasn't working. She was going through everyone's drawers, one by one. She opened mine last, rifled through it slowly. At one point, she held up my photo from a company event, stared at it for several seconds, then smiled at it before placing it back exactly where it was. I forwarded the footage to our manager. The next day, Rachel didn't show up, not even to collect her things. Her desk was cleared out, her phone disconnected, her apartment emptied. No forwarding address, no explanation. She simply vanished. Then there was Mark, a warehouse supervisor at a company I worked for briefly. He was the kind of guy who treated being in charge like it was a personality. Always patrolling the aisles, always checking to see who was on break and who wasn't. One night after closing, the alarms kept triggering in the warehouse. Security checked the footage and saw Mark walking around inside at 2 a.m., even though he'd clocked out hours earlier. He was pacing the aisles, muttering to himself, stopping at certain shelves and pointing as if directing someone. But he was completely alone. His eyes were wide, unblinking. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. When management confronted him, he just said, "I wasn't alone. You just didn't see them." They fired him the next day. But for months afterward, employees working late reported footsteps in the aisles when no one else was around. Boxes shifting on their own. Soft whispers echoing down the metal racks. People joked about it at first, then they stopped joking. But the worst story happened at my old marketing job. A new hire named Brianna joined the team. She was quiet, polite, always kept to herself, never made small talk. Over time, I started catching her staring at me during meetings. Not glancing, not observing, just staring. Unblinking, studying me like I was a puzzle she was trying to solve. One morning, I walked into the office kitchen and found her standing there alone, holding my personal coffee thermos. She said she found it under her desk, but I had used it that morning. I knew I hadn't misplaced it. Later that week, I got friend requests from her on every social platform. I denied them. Seconds later, I got a text from an unknown number. "You don't have to be scared of me." I hadn't even saved her number. That night, I stayed late. The office was empty, every sound amplified. When I went to grab my keys from my desk, I found a handwritten note tucked beneath them. "I like you better when you're alone." My hands went cold. I looked up, slowly, and at the far end of the hallway, Brianna was standing there, just watching me. No expression, no blinking. Security escorted her out of the building within minutes. HR fired her the next morning. But somehow, she still left one last message behind. When I walked to my car in the parking garage, there was a note tucked under my windshield wiper. Same handwriting. "This isn't over. Not for you." It's been years, and I haven't seen her since. But every time I leave work, I still check the shadows. I can't shake the feeling that one day, she'll be there again, watching. It's unsettling when you realize the truth. You don't need a dark alley or an abandoned house to feel scared. Sometimes the scariest people are the ones who say good morning to you every day. The ones who know your schedule, your habits, your weaknesses. The ones who know where you park and what time you leave. The ones close enough to hear your heartbeat. without you noticing theirs. And it makes you wonder, how well do you really know the people you work with?